All right. Thank you, gosh. So thank you guys for coming, and taking some time on a Wednesday evening to talk about Wharf Park. It's a great spot. And I think with a lot of community feedback, we've come up with what we think is a pretty stellar plan for down there. Something that fits with the community, that's going to achieve a lot of our goals and a lot of the goals that the community told us they want this park to achieve. So I'm going to read some of this. I hope you guys don't mind. My name is Scott McKay. I'm a former park commissioner, and I am also on the board of the Milton Farmers Market and on the board of the Friends of Milton Recreation, which is just a group of folks who previously the Milton playground planners who constructed the 4 new playgrounds in town. And that group kind of morphed into something a little larger to help out other projects and other folks in town who want to raise money for certain projects. So just having been a part of the farmers market and seeing what the space has been and what it could be, we decided to focus some energy on this. So that's how it started. So if you take a look around, there's different pockets of folks here. We've got people from the Community Preservation Commission or committee, some folks who are in the neighborhood at 88 Wharf. We have planning board members, a current park commissioner, and Marita, who was one of the original founding members of the Milton Farmers Market, is also here. So,
and the resident.
And
perhaps the only one. I don't know.
A resident.
A resident.
He's a resident of 88 Wharf as well. So thank you guys for coming.
I'm also a butter.
88 Wharf. Great. Thank you for coming. So this process started about 1.5 years ago, when a steering committee of some folks got together and said, we need to do something about this park. It's fair. A lot of the tree root exposure and also the topography of the land made it very unsafe for folks. And as a user of the park at the Milton Farmers Market, it was not accessible for folks, nor inviting for folks in our community to use this park as a passive park or as an active park. It really didn't lend itself to much activity. So we wrote a $25,000 grant to the Community Preservation Committee just to study what this space could be. And that's what this process is ending up with at this point. Is we took all the different concepts from different folks and said, what should this park be? What should be the vision of this park? And different pockets of folks had different input along the way. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, this is kind of the culmination of a lot of visioning and concepts for this park. I just want to say that in any civic project, you're taking on a big responsibility to try to represent and help community achieve something. And it's very difficult and uncomfortable sometimes. There's a lot of elected folks here. And you don't often get, you often get competing interests. And I think that the two gentlemen in front of you navigated those differences extremely well and were able to take the multitude of recommendations and synthesize it down into something that touches on every single one of those aspects. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this. But I just wanted to thank you guys for your time. This was a really amazing process. So from the community meetings, there were really 5 concepts that folks came up with that we wanted to pay specific attention to. And the first 3 concepts really came from the last meeting that was here in March with a larger community. And then we had a meeting with the Select Board Landing Committee, the arts community, and also the surrounding businesses around that neighborhood. We did not specifically have an 88 Wharf conversation. That was considered with the larger group at March. We had a lot of input from the 88 Wharf at that point. So I wanted to point that out as well. So the three things that we came up with from those meetings, maintain, create, and sustain the open green space and planted areas of the park. We wanted to, or it was recommended to keep as much of the area as green space as possible, create pollinator gardens for beauty and ecological improvements, continue to plant trees for natural shade and habitat, and create a flexible grade space for play and commerce. So that's number one. Number two was safety and security. Again, I talked about how uneven the topography was there or is there currently. So that was another crux of what we needed to address in this design. So we wanted to create an accessible park. It is not accessible the way it is now. As a farmers market board member, a lot of our patrons are older folks, and it's not natural. So we wanted to create a space that was accessible. We needed to level the walkways. Our stairways are going to have handrails. And we also wanted to create lighting for the space. That was something that we heard at the meeting from the 88 Wharf folks was in the evenings, we want to be able to have some facial recognition for folks who maybe in the park that shouldn't be. So that was considered in the plan as well. The third thing that came up and probably has the most bullet points is functionality. We wanted to create, or we heard from folks that we needed to create an active and a passive space with flexibility and the potential for multiple uses. So we heard that it would be great to have an open space for community gatherings. A better design for continued farmers market use, some sort of an amphitheater or lawn seating space for music and arts, power and plumbing, whether it's something that's installed initially or something down the road, power and plumbing on the site that can be accessible. Casual seating alternatives, picnic tables, benches, seat wall spaces, anything that's going to invite people to sit down and spend additional time in the park. Accommodate some sort of space for storage for public restrooms and or public restrooms. A potential space for art installations, bike racks, rowing storage, which didn't make it into this plan, but as part of the Milton Landing Committee, there are discussions to relocate that onto town-owned property. So it was considered and involved in the discussion, but it's not going to show up in the final design. And the lastly is to minimize any sort of maintenance requirements. We have limited resources to continue maintenance of the space. So that was considered in the overall design to make it as simple as possible to maintain. So then we had an additional meeting and two more concepts came up. And I think it really, there were three options that we brought out initially to discuss space. And I think that we could have worked with any of those three to address those first three concepts. But the next two came towards the end of the process, and it was a discussion we had with the planning board. We walked the site extensively, and two more concepts came up that I think were super important to the project. Connectivity and the orientation of the park. So connectivity would include pedestrian connections to the MBTA, businesses on Adams Street, the stairway connection from Adams Street down to where the parking lot is now, and then across the road and into the park to have some consistency of flow from Adams Street down into the park. And then also create the design for the space that's in context with other parks and spaces on the waterfront. and you'll see the designs that these guys will show you further down. You'll be able to see the symmetry between the different parks. And lastly was the orientation. A lot of the first initial phases had the park kind of oriented this way towards the parking lot. And based on the planning board meeting, it was like a light going off for a lot of us that this is waterfront property. And that should be, if not the main focus, but at least the orientation of the park. So you'll see that these areas, there's an open view to the water. And it really highlights the natural resources that Milton has to offer in this unique, this is the only waterfront we have in town. So it's important to involve that into the design. So that's kind of where we are now. And I'd like to give it to you guys to go over some of the designs.
Scott, that was amazing. It was amazing.
Well,
I don't know how you.
It's just truth telling.
Can we see just by hands real quick, who was here for the sort of the first presentation? So maybe like a third, maybe less than that.
I was watching.
So okay, great. So Matt, if we go to the next slide. So then just to bring you guys, I don't want to be too repetitive, but I just want to sort of like start at the beginning. And so actually let's touch on this real quick in terms of the process and where we're at. So I think that's an important sort of point of this presentation. So like Scott said, we've been going through a series of meetings, and I have to say, this has been the collaboration of the different groups we've met, the insight and the input has been incredibly valuable to us, and it's been a pleasurable experience. And a lot of times working with towns, it can be contentious. And I think that everyone had a really great attitude towards the development and design of this park, and it's been quite amazing. But where we are right now is we're memorializing the concept design. So that's what we're presenting to you guys tonight. And we want you to understand sort of what the synthesized notes that Scott just sort of delivered to you guys is, how did this design come to fruition? And that's what we're going to sort of share with you. In terms of, we're going to open up for comments at the end, so we can still hear from you. But what we're going to do is we're sort of saying, this is where we are. This is the concept. And then the next step for us is to start to take this concept and develop it into a constructible set of drawings that can get built. Then we throw it back to Scott because he's going to have to come up with additional funding for us to be able to do that. And then we'll start to establish budgets and all those sort of things. So I believe we have a presentation or a meeting on the 10th with the select board.
Yes.
So that's coming, relatively soon, but we'll be essentially sharing the same presentation for them. If we go to the next slide, this slide is for the ones that were here at the first public presentation. This is what you saw. And so, a lot of the comments that we got, we're dialing in on very detailed information, and it was sort of almost premature, but it was really helpful for us because we were able to start to take some of the feedback and integrate it into the idea of what this concept of the park wanted to be. So just very big picture. When Matt and I were looking at this, we were like, okay, so, we want to address accessibility, we want to address safety, we want to address ADA compliance, and we also want to make this a really nice space for the town. So option one, which is on the left, we said, okay, we're going to take down both trees because the issue is the grades. And if you guys know about code compliance with slopes, 5% slope is the maximum you can have without handrails. With towns, we try to minimize any handrails and any sloped walkways or sidewalks because they're a maintenance issue, and also you're putting budget towards that. So option one was, let's level this space and let's make it flat. Option two was to keep the tree closest to the MBTA. You can sort of see that the largest circle flanking the pavilion. And we made more of a sort of a civic building that was centrally located in the green space. The last scheme, which the majority of everyone was sort of like leaning towards, was the idea of potentially keeping both trees that had an amphitheater, that had these sort of soft curves to it. And so we took, and I'm going to say that this was where everyone was leaning. There was a group of people that were interested in the idea of an architectural element in the park to sort of give it some gravity. So we were sort of like trying to play around with all these ideas, right? So, but we used this sort of option 3 as our base. And then if we go to the next slide.
Just a quick question. Where is the T? I'm trying to orientate myself.
So the T is over here to the left.
Oh, wow.
88 Wharf is on the top of the screen.
Oh, I get it. Okay, thank you.
There's one station, just off to the.
So we had a great meeting with the planning board. That might have been, was that 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe? And so Scott was talking about the orientation of the park. And so sort of big picture and from a context standpoint, we started to think about the park and how it related to the Neponset River Walk and the views to the river. What you're also going to start to see once we start to dive into sort of the more perspectival images is that where these trees are located, there's an amphitheater slope on that side as well. So for gathering, your physical body would be oriented towards the water. This scheme keeps the large beech tree that's existing on the site, which is approximately here. But in terms of the idea of this park, the concept is this sort of foil, garden and clearing. And when you sort of create those contrasting sort of experiences, it allows us to achieve pollinator gardens. It's starting to sort of achieve the idea of creating more of a living green space and then a functional green space. Another important aspect of this from a context standpoint is the form making. So we took a walk with the planning board down to sort of, we'll call it the little micro garden that's closest. And we were really interested in this sort of curved or soft sort of shapes that lower garden was designed. And I was thinking that was originally a Carol Johnson design, but it's Halverson. But these curved walks were really nice. We were like, you know what, that could be a great, using that to sort of make this the mama garden, the mama park, and the baby garden. That relationship could be really cool. And then the last contextual connection was the Olmsted sort of sweeping walkway, sort of upslope, more or less where my hand is. And you'll see again some more detailed images of that. But to make a stronger connection into the park from that sweeping set of stairs. This is a great shot. So to orient you, the river is top right corner. 88 Wharf is more or less top left. This is the parking space right here. And then this is the set of steps that are leading you from Adams Street, and it would sweep you right down into the park.
You want to go back and you can see the
Is
concentric.
that all you, those big sweeping stairs?
They're existing. Yeah, they're existing, but we believe it was an Olmsted design, which we think we need to highlight that as a historic element.
Are they part of the renovation as well, because they're showing some signs of?
We have the park. No. We would love to start. And so there's been bigger picture conversations about that because, part of this design is, bringing in some pole lights, to sort of illuminate it. And so the idea of potentially illuminating this with pole lights to make it more inviting. And then if that were to happen, repairing that set of steps would be.
So we're going to zoom in just a tiny bit, just to focus on the area that is the actual Wharf Park space. So that's about 40,000 square feet of space, not including what's across the street. But I think this is a great image to show how we're trying to conceive these pieces of land as connected, both to the uphill side across the street and then down to the water. So I'm going to show you a brief plan that looks like it's been colored in by someone's child, but I promise it was me. So what this is basically a program diagram. So in some ways, trying to distill down what the different parts of the park is so that they are easily understandable, and it shows you a little bit more about how they connect. So the first thing I like to touch on is the blue arrows. So that's a little bit about the connectivity that we talked about. So you'll see the access stair from across the street, this connection down a new set of stairs. The dash line indicates not ADA compliant, meaning a set of stairs with a handrail. The blue line that's solid would be a continuous pathway, no need for ramps or curbs or anything like that. So this is the accessible route into the park. And then we did add a new crosswalk coming from this direction, so that there is safe crossing from that side of the street as well. Starting at the top right, you'll see an orange rectangle. That's a placeholder, like Scott was talking about. This might be an area for future comfort station, future storage, but the idea being that we maybe would run plumbing and electrical to that spot so that it is in place when we need to do that. Coming further down to the right, you'll see a couple of big yellow dots. Those are streetlights. So count 5 total yellow dots that are spread out across the site to give you that nice level of light recognition. So when people are out there in the park at night, you can actually see who's walking next to you on the site. This heavy magenta line indicates a seat wall. So a wall that's maybe the height of a chair, something that's very easy to sit on. Doesn't have a back. Sometimes that's a question we have a lot of times is it easy to sit on a seat wall? Sure. Some people like to have a back to support their kind of lower backs. We do have some benches that are also included in here. We'll see those red little rectangles. Those would be your typical park bench, a very small kind of 3 foot by 8 foot park bench. Back, arms, very comfortable to get in and out of, easy to get up from. The other thing you'll see a lot of are these orange squares, and that's our layout, roughly schematic for the farmers market setup. So one thing we wanted to make sure of when we were thinking about this park or conceiving this park is that there was enough room for all the market stalls that we like to imagine being kind of situated in that space with adequate room to circulate around on all sides. So if you're setting up the farmers market in this location, you would have a hard surface for people to walk on this side, and then a softer surface on the interior of the lawn. So it's kind of a two-sided effect.
And whether or not Chris abides by this layout, we can't control it.
Great commit.
As we look at this okay looking parking lot to the left, our concern would be to include a little bit of a green screen to start to shield those cars from view. We just want to make sure that we're creating a nice backdrop for people as they're sitting here and looking out at the we did insert a staircase that would connect the businesses up on that end down to the park, which was a really great element that we had some feedback on to create a little bit more of a connectivity point at that location on site. I think before we had, as Bill said, the orientation was a bit focused on Wharf Street. And I think by opening up some connections on that corner, it allows people to come in from a different angle and kind of frequent those businesses in a different way. Next, you'll see some big green circles. And so those would indicate new ornamental or flowering trees. So because we are removing or proposing to remove trees from the site, we like to always balance it out with adding some trees back in. And those trees would, of course, line Wharf Street and be a nice visual presence from the roadway to kind of frame the backdrop of that seawall. The other major element is up on the kind of northern end. There are some picnic tables. I'm not sure what that's. Behind the meeting is being recorded, there are some picnic tables at the farther kind of northern side. And then as you work your way down the end, there's some parking for bicycles, a new sidewalk connection along that whole stretch of roadway, making it easier for people to kind of walk up and down from the MBTA station. And then as you work your way up to the top of the site, you'll see a little indication here of 2 monument piers. And that is also something that we probably would consider a placeholder at this time. I think there's so much historical context to the site. We wanted to make sure we were thinking about a place where we could, at some point down the road, conceive of interpretive signage or historical connotations about what the site actually was. So whether or not those are just plain granite piers that are, really big and gesture towards the water, there's a lot of opportunities on all sides of those pieces of granite to have some sort of interpretation about what the site is historically. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So this is just a view of the plan minus all the coloring. And you can kind of see the location of the flowering trees on the bottom, some additional flowering trees up here, and what would be a more kind of pollinator garden moment where we had some some plants that weren't necessarily trimmed, really well maintained. They were just kind of left to go and naturalize. And then, as Bill mentioned before, this side on the left side of the site would be a sloped lawn panel. So you can imagine sitting on that lawn panel and then looking out towards the water on this side. And we're going to show you a couple of perspective renderings of potential setups for both the farmers market and for a stage. They would allow people to sit with their backs again against this wall and look out towards this direction. Bill, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah,
This is just a labeled version of the plan. So we've taken it and tried to make it 3D, right? And we're pointing out everything that I hopefully just mentioned. So
I think, I think a lot of the pictorial images that you're about to see is essentially just sort of encapsulating the design. And I don't know if there's a lot of words that we need to give to you because the rendering is so powerful, but I guess probably one of the more sort of unique elements to the site was the concept of this sort of sloped or amphitheater sort of condition, sort of along the slope, along, where it notes evergreen screen and sloped observation lawn. That came from, we had a great, excitable meeting with an arts group. And so the idea of having space that's sort of elevated, that gives you a sense of prospect, is really quite unique. And so we really wanted to use that. There's an existing wall there that's failing. And so whenever there's an opportunity to sort of, you have sort of a neglected element on the site, is there a way to use that to enhance the experience in the park? And so rather than rebuilding another, we've talked about a series of different things. Rebuilding a new wall in front of it to sort of make sure that it's not going to collapse in on us. In this case, which we like even better, is to backfill up against it. We're not even going to touch it. So we're not investing money in a structural element, but we're using soil and planted elements to sort of create an inhabitable space. All of the wall, one thing to note, and then we'll start to go through the slides so you can sort of get in at the sort of the human level, is that all of the walls, for the most part, there's a section next to the steps that might be a little bit taller than 2 feet, but they're all about this tall. So the idea is that you can, like Matt was saying, so you can sit. So that's the concept. The material palette of this park is something we wanted to convey in concept, and then we're going to have to develop it once we start to work through budgets, is natural materials and also contextual. The 88 Wharf has brick, and it would be nice to sort of bring that brick element into this park to, again, create cohesion within this larger landscape. And then, this area of New England sort of has a history of granites. So we would do like stone walls, stone steps, potentially could mimic the Olmstedian curving set of steps as well. But we would love to use natural materials as sort of the intent from a concept. This you probably couldn't see. So these are the picnic tables sort of underneath the trees right here. And then we do have bike parking. We want to encourage alternative transportation to the site whenever we can. Matt, if you want to flip through some.
I'm just going to give you a kind of a little bit of an orientation about where some of the views you're going to see are taken from. So there's a couple of different perspectival views. First one was at the very beginning of the presentation. It was looking down the kind of main set of stairs that connects up the hill. So we'll take a look at that one again. So if you can imagine yourself, all these views are going to be at eye level. These views we call bird's eye views, but we're going to take you down into the site so you can see what things might feel like when you're actually on the ground. So we did have a view from up here looking down these stairs into the park. And then there's one or two views from this side. So if you imagine coming from the MBTA, what's it going to feel like when you come out of that train and you're walking into the hill? We wanted to make sure it feels like it's a nice, welcoming, inviting space from that angle too, not just from Wharf Street. And then there'll be a couple of views looking from the main kind of entry between these two piers. And then just a couple of fun shots, like I said before, about showing a potential stage setup and where people might sit versus where the staging would be. So again, this is looking as you come down the stairs and then looking kind of to the left where we're going to hide that kind of green parking, or sorry, that parking behind this green screen. And then this is the sloped lawn panel, which Bill was mentioning, where, during an event, people can sit up here and look down at a stage or a setup that would be on the lower lawn level pier. And then what you're seeing are just, like I said, not bird's eye view, exactly eye level. And then we've put in some, just some model figures just to give it a little bit of scale so you can start to kind of feel how big the space might be. Just for reference, the circle in the middle is about 70 feet across. So it's not super big, but it's definitely big enough to put a good sized tent or stage setup. And then the pathway around the outside of the circle, I think, is a really nice size as well, because like I said before, there will be the occasional need for trucks to come in and offload things for the farmers market. So we wanted to make sure that that was wide enough to be a shared, potentially vehicular pathway as well for people to offload and come back in and out. This is that view looking from the corner. If you imagine coming off the train and looking into the picnic grove, this is that set of stairs that would connect to the businesses up above. So that's I think a really pretty view from the street. Again, trying not to feel like we're walling that part of the neighborhood off, but trying to actually address it and connect to it. So you'll see the kind of picnic grove area, which could be in lawn. And then the kind of notion of a meadow pollinator garden feeling, and then some places for bicycle parking on that corner. So trying to tuck those kind of different elements into little pockets so they aren't so obvious from each other.
Personally, I love this moment. I think this could be a spectacular moment coming up.
And then beyond, you have the existing beech tree, the big tree, and then just a couple of more newer ornamental trees that we would add in to, again, try to mitigate the loss from this. This is that first view we saw, looking down that staircase as you come down the big Olmsted stair across the street. And then in this version, I just put in some really nice market tents. Really nice tents. I have a feeling they might be different in reality, but let's just pretend. So this is just a quick view, some sense of scale for how big a 10 by 10 tent might be with some people walking around. We think the scale feels really nice that there's, two sides to this vendor element, so that maybe while people are buying things at the front along the brick pathway, there is that common space in the middle for people to still use the park while it's a farmer's market. Just a view, as I said, coming across the street. So this is those big kind of granite hulking monument piers, which could be used for interpretive signage at some point down the road. We just did a very, kind of schematic plaque that could be just a description of the park or a naming opportunity for the park. But the idea being that it was very, very significant. And in those two spaces, I think there is a lot of opportunity for what that could be, whether it's sculpture or signage or anything. But I think that what this gives you a good sense of is the kind of more level lawn space that we have. This lawn, because we added those stairs from Wharf Street, we were kind of able to get that lawn slope down to about 2.5%, 3%, which is very easy to walk on. And of course, by removing that oak tree, we have no more tripping roots.
One thing to point out, this gets sort of weirdly technical at this point, but I just want to convey sort of the intentions. As you can see, there's a slope here. Right, you guys can see that. And so it's a balance. We're trying to cut down to make this as level as we can. So at the steps, so our two control points are the bottom of our new steps and the tree. And so what we've done is we've sort of cut and filled to create a little bit of a balance. The thing that's nice too, whenever you're in I think this feels urban, right? Whenever you're in urban green spaces and you feel like you're perched up a little bit, has a really great sort of human feel to it, that you're in a space that's separate from the street. So I just wanted to point that little detail out.
Again, walking probably on the interior part of the circle. So the beech tree, the existing beech tree is to your right there. And just a shot to give you a sense of the width of that pathway. Much, big enough for two people walking one way to pass two people walking the other direction. And then this is a kind of idea for a potential stage setup for an event. And Scott has volunteered to put up and take down the tent every single time, which is so nice of him. So what we did here was just a quick study to see what this might feel like during the dusk hours or the evening hours when you might have a stage set up for a concert or a play. And then the idea of, could we potentially utilize these light pole fixtures so they kind of serve double duty so that they're not just light fixtures, but they actually could act as a stanchion to support a shade canopy. And the kind of the next two views are looking kind of from the back of the site towards the big staircase going up the hill. So this would be the kind of, I just got off the T and coming to the park. This is how it's going to feel entering the park underneath that canopy with some people standing. The potential for chairs would also be a definite option here. But again, that sloped lawn panel is situated back in this zone for people to sit. And then just a quick evening shot showing people, again, sitting on that sloped lawn, looking towards the water, down the hill, and underneath the canopy to the stage. And so
I guess at this point, I mean, we'd love to just hear your thoughts. And because, we're still collecting information, but at this point, this is sort of the memorialization of all the meetings that we've had, but it was important for us to share with you guys of how we've landed here. So we'd like to open it up for, any good, bad. We have calloused backs, hands from this process. So, any comments are welcome. But, we could still build on that, but at this point in time, it's a pause, it's a memorialization of the plan, and we can potentially take these comments up later.
So much to say. I hate to start. I'll say the positive. I think what really was and is needed is that accessible walkway. All right. And that's really basically all that I see was needed. I have no idea how people find out about these meetings. I don't subscribe to the Milton Times. I only got an email about this because I emailed someone about something else. And so I'm coming in and you just have to, all the work that's gone into this. We sat in on a conservation meeting and I admire anyone who can sit in on any meeting. Because this is popular. But, and I think I obviously am here as someone probably who has a very different view of the space than a lot of people.
Sure.
It feels very conceptual to me. It also, because of the way it's put up there, looks bigger than it really is. Okay, so it gives the sense. I'm not critiquing the landscape artist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to be more concrete. My experience for 25 years of the space, sort of what it feels like.
For sure.
So I worry about lights. Do we need more lights? There's no shade. Maybe the shade will come along. But right now, I measured that tree. The tree has life in it. The tin oak tree. There's also other trees around there. The farmers who come, the people who come, really need the shade in summers like we've been having.
It's true.
Practically parking where people can park. So these are all just, I'm throwing them out, but nothing, it's just like, sorry, I can't shut up. I mean, I will shut up.
No, I mean,
It's more the fact that I don't have the vision that other people have had that have filled into this. So all I see that's needed is that. I don't see that we need a big constructed park there, but we do need accessibility. We have art in other places. It just, and you said urban at one point, and that's what it kind of feels like.
So
And just one more thing, I will not say another word. The other thing is our tax money goes into this. I never can remember if it's federal, state, or town taxes going to the planning grants. We have an enormous Japanese knotweed problem in Milton. To fix that takes, pardon my French, a shitload of money and time. And that's going to overtake the town legally eventually if they don't do something about it. So my druthers is do less here, do more about invasive species, do more about educating people. And that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the work that went into this.
Well,
so that's
no, just to give you, because as a sidebar, so I'm on the Shade Tree Committee, Marita's on the Shade. We were just talking, so I think that not in a vacuum, I think there's a lot of other conversations going on about that issue. But everything that you said was great because we've heard a lot of that feedback. which was excellent for you to convey to us. The thing that we were trying to balance, one item, I just want you to sort of keep this in the back of your mind, is that the oak tree definitely has life in it.
It's like,
Definitely has life in it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I measured it today. I know how long they live.
so it definitely, so no one is arguing that. We all agree. It is in decline, the tree. And so the challenge for us was, okay, so if we do make renovations to the park to make it ADA compliant, the question is, do we build that around something that's declining that will probably fail in 10 to 15 years? Where a park, we need to think about it in 40, 50-year increments. So those are the things that we're thinking about. And so, but I want you to know, your comments are appreciated, and they have been echoed by others. And so, we've been trying to integrate those comments.
Yeah, as I said, I live in Milton Landing. I'm an original owner. I've been there 19 years. This is my front yard. And I'm a little surprised that nobody from Milton Landing knows about all these events that occurred. It's easy enough to notify the building, just let the concierge know, and we put up notice. But apparently, here we are. So be it. I guess I'm particularly interested in the fate of the beech tree, the rose beech. And that's a beautiful tree. It has a wonderful crown, and it's glorious in the spring when it basically is maroon and red.
We love it.
And yeah, it's really very nice. So if that to make it through all this, it's a great tragedy. So I noticed one of your item 3 or plan 3 keeps the tree. So.
The current concept is we are keeping the tree, and we will. So as landscape architects, we love trees. We just want everyone to know we love trees. And it's our medium, right? That's sort of how we paint and create spaces. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions. But the beech tree we want to keep. And so what we do in our technical documentation is we denote how we will protect it, whether or not we're doing pre-deep root fertilization for trees, we're putting construction fences up. So those are the things that that next step will make sure that these trees are protected, because if not, this person right here can get very angry quickly. So that's what we do though.
These trees are being affected by an invisible worm. And this particular tree, because it stands alone, is healthy.
Right.
And I think it has many years to grow. I can't imagine how much carbon it sucks in and oxygen it gives out.
Exactly.
That's a lot.
Exactly.
And so now I noticed you mentioned bathrooms in this place. Of course, I will make it very friendly to the. I live where I can look at the park, and I can also look out at the bike trail in the back, and we get quite a few interesting people that wander in the city. And so it's nice that you'll be providing them a bathroom. I hope there's a cleaning schedule, because you're going to need it.
Correct. Yeah. And that's one of the sort of the items on our list. That's a wish list item. So in terms of the logistics of the bathroom facility, whether or not it even becomes a bathroom facility, that's a big question, because it would not be a cheap item. And so again, that gets into the realities of the budgets. But conceptually speaking, it would be nice to have, and maybe it even turns into a porta potty. We're not sort of at that level yet.
Like a porta potty.
So, but just so you're aware, like right now, we're sort of at that big picture level. And so it could become a storage spot. But the idea of an architectural element that had a function in that corner is something that we're thinking about.
The commercial people, you talk to the bank and the post office and the hardware store, that they're good to go on this.
Oh, they're out of their minds, excited. Yeah.
Parking is a problem at Wharf Park area. And, but there's not much to begin with, and fortunately, there's no more creative, but, say la vie, I guess. And the farm market, generally they show up with the trucks and set up, and is that gonna be more appealing to them or less? I have no idea.
But so, Chris is a part of that. So he's been giving us a lot of feedback. Scott's been a part of that. So they've been giving us some feedback. So we think that, it's, it'll be a change that will be great for them, for sure.
I noticed this year we have a few less vendors than we've had in the previous year, so I would like to encourage more vendors for the farm markets. It's a popular spot and handy. But that's like the shop local.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for your feedback.
Thanks for coming.
Also from 88, just to say that I'm very appreciative of your sensitivity to the other designs that have been made, because I think the part that's closer to the main wharf itself, wonderful to see children playing in that place, and then the things that are there. So I think this reflects all of that very, very nicely. I think to build on Brad's issues, parking has been a major issue for mostly invasive into the 88 Wharf Street space. And we've done whatever we can do with better signage and those kinds of things. Lighting, you also mentioned, which you mentioned, is a major thing, particularly for people like Brad who look out on that particular thing. So I looked at the way your stanchion lightings are, and that could be pretty bright and come right into people's windows. And I think maybe I understand why you're trying to have it a multifunctional design, but I think, a different kind of capture on the top of that to hold the light a little more directed would be.
I mean, what we could, that's a great comment. And so what we can do is we can do cutoffs in light and sort of light fixtures itself. So as an example, maybe this, again, we're sort of at the concept phase of this idea of this actual fixture, it's probably going to look something different. But in terms of we could put a cutoff on this side, so there's no light loss or light bleeding towards 88 Wharf, as well as the top. So if you're looking out from an upper story, you would look down and it would be illuminated ground plane, but you're not seeing the hot, bright light of the source of the light. We would be very, very conscious of that, for sure.
I also think that the creation of seating spaces is really great. One of the things we know from the main wharf itself is that there is a contingent of individuals. It's hard to know, I see signs that say this park is open from dawn to dusk. Well, there's a lot of activity in the evenings, and I don't know how you do that other than put the gate up, which I make the gate up. But I do think to sort of discourage places that are too common, so that people don't, lounge overnight and those kinds of things. And there's really no to do that, other than I think with this plan needs to come a commitment from the town.
Right.
Or both maintenance, which you've heard about, which actually the wharf is looking much, much better since the changes that have been made. But also for police presence, most people are doing everything wonderful, having a great time with their families. Just having an occasional person come through would be very good in the area.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So this is the first time I've seen this concept, and I'm jazzed by it. I think it's pretty cool. One of the aspects that intrigues me a lot is the idea of having an amphitheater and a little more outdoor art would be great. So the only thing that I'm thinking of that might be in the way of improvement is I'm thinking about how people can access an amphitheater comfortably. And I'm thinking in particular for older people, that the space that's available right now does not look very accessible to them. So the two places you mentioned where there might be seating, the sloped grass, I don't think that would be good for people who have stability issues. And I don't think a seawall would be very comfortable for older people either. So I don't know whether you were envisioning having chairs, for instance, around, the brick area. That would be nice, but that takes me back to the shade issue, which could, I was recently at Tanglewood and, we were seeing this fabulous concert, but the sun was coming right down on everyone and it was
Right.
really uncomfortable. So thinking about, where the sun sets and, what available shading there might be for people to really be able to sit there during the nicest parts of the day, which is really around the sunset time, is something to think about.
That's great. One of the things that we always like to think about, because our medium is Mother Nature, we think about there's the warm months when the market's going to be there, and then there's the cooler months and the colder months. And so I think your point is well taken, because we just located benches underneath or in the sort of the planted areas for shade. There are opportunities to do some benches that are sort of in the sunlight for when the weather does get cooler and you want to feel some sun on you. But then maybe there's opportunities, Matt, for us to plant some trees for shade in that slope. Yeah, to provide some additional shade. So those are great. That's great feedback. And I think, one of the challenges with amphitheaters or anything that's raised at a relatively fast rate is to provide those experiences for people with mobility challenges, because you're trying to get people elevationally up fast, and we need to make it sort of easy. So your point's well taken, and that's something that we can consider as we move forward, for sure.
I make a suggestion about that as a designer to designer. Where at the top of the stair is your new stair coming down from Wharf, if you came off at a level area.
Yeah.
Like you in theater, so you can have people come in up, they're already high.
That's a great point. That was going to be also to our mowing access point. So that could work perfectly. Yeah.
Related to that, and it would add more construction, but could there be some stone so that they're more that it's tiered and not just a slope, because that would
Yeah.
be difficult to mow, and the less people are just gonna not everybody's gonna plunk down on the grass or the dirt, depends on how well things grow there.
Absolutely. That's right now, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I just want us all to be on the same page. This is sort of like the idea of it, whether or not it ultimately becomes, because there could be a section of it that's more of a stone hardscape piece. So the maintenance is pretty low, and then there could be an element that's softer with lawn. So there could be sort of a mixing of types of surfaces.
I love that.
Thanks. See, that's why we work well. No, but I think we could sort of start to think about that. And again, that is the real driver for that will ultimately be the budget, in terms of how do we make that investment? Do we try to sprinkle that investment over everything? Or do we focus on the greatest investment are our walls and then other paved areas? So there's going to be a little, we're going to create pots of money of whatever that funding is that we have available. And then those are those hard decisions. Then.
Just give a little heads up, we actually doing stuff. If you do the bathrooms, you're below grade. We have the same problem in '88, and that was on the original board. And the first thing we did was to buy a backup pump. Because the pump fails, you can't flush the toilet.
Right.
So it has to be pumped up. And there's always a problem of it being jammed up. So
I see Maggie in the back of the room, and we were talking about that a couple months ago about,
And then who owns the sewer pipe going up? It's very complex. So, I'm gonna give you a lot of luck on that.
I mean, we appreciate Matt and I have been building parks for a long time. And so all of these things that you guys it feels like you guys have been around the block in terms of landscape design. So it's great feedback. But yeah, those are the parts and pieces of it that are really challenging, for sure. Yes.
Is there part of the plan, is there incorporated into it, additional parking. So what, based on, compared to what there is now, they're planning to have additional.
There's
If they're gonna have the ability to do more work than.
Right.
Draw in more people. You certainly can't park up on that.
No, there's none of that.
so there, yeah, we currently in the plan do not have any additional parking.
It's difficult now. Market.
Right.
Which doesn't draw a lot of people. But it's gonna fill up what new spaces.
There is for those folks who live in the area. Farmers market folks are typically parking as close as they can, so they don't have to walk. There is additional parking where the yacht club is, which is completely underutilized. We as a farmers market board, we had conversations, and a couple things is one is that this brick circular walkway kind of is an homage to the rundown brick parkway. So I wanted to point that out, which is currently being used by vehicles during the market. And people are parking there, and also our vendors are parking along the road where it says new sidewalk here. I can't see why programmatically we can't change that to say, you can come in here and unload your stuff, but when it comes to market day, you need to put your market vehicle down at that on 88 Wharf, or down near the water where there is that. It's going to free up, it's not going to give you 20 more spots, but it's certainly going to get you 10 spots that are closer to the market.
The farmer's market traffic is moving. So that's very different than saying we have an art exhibit, we have theater, we have whatever. Everybody comes at the same time. So I think that is an orange.
Well, you can do what they do for what they do 700 in field, at the field. You can arrange for, vans to come and bring people if you have that big an event, but it's not that big space. So that, you're not gonna have that.
And there could be potential to partner with the MBTA that lots of people. Problem being now that you're gonna get towed or ticketed if you refuse that space. If there's an actual event, perhaps we can partner with them to allow, for them to allow us to use this.
Maybe there can be a way to encourage use of the bike path. It's the way that I frequently access the area. And if there's an event, maybe there's reduced price, or if you like the farmer's market had, or used to have, I'm not sure. If you arrive at.
I think an important part of the success of any park is, someone said maintenance, and Marita and I were talking about maintenance for this space is going to be really important, the logistics of it and the operations side of it as well. So, once we start to sort of flush through the actual design and what's ultimately going to get built, those are the conversations that we'll have to have with the town to make sure that there's a long-term commitment from a maintenance standpoint, and then also too in terms of just the day-to-day when there's certain events that are going to happen. So that will need to be part of this conversation.
I just wanted to say that I looked at the original designs that you had, because I'm on the community preservation committee, so we're looking at that, and I really love option for
The refined option.
I like it a lot. I live over on East Milton, and they put in these fancy tiles, this decking over the highway, and it all popped up. So my question, I think the idea of the brick is wonderful because it ties into the chocolate factory and all that sort of stuff. But I'm hoping that there's some, sort of brick-like thing that isn't going to be actual brick. That's going to be more of a problem to me.
We did the main West Pearl Street in Nashua, New Hampshire, just recently, and they had the same feedback. And so we've gone through a series of different type of pressed brick pavers that are incredibly durable, and we won't. Yeah. So once we get to that point, we can ensure that it's not going to happen for sure.
But I think it's great. I think
And I'll build off of Kathleen that, I was here at the March meeting, but also, I'm the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and we did a study here some time ago now.
Really great study, by the way. Someone gave that to us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But, you know, our fear was that the study would be popular at the time and then sit on the shelf and not have any implementation. So I'm really happy to see implementation moving forward. So thank you, Scott, and others for advancing it. And I really think you did a really great job of synthesizing so many comments, because I heard all the comments at that meeting in March and also from our planning board walk. And I really think that this is going in the right direction, a really nice scheme. So
Great.
thank
Thank you.
How much did you, in your plan, Cheryl, did you do the closer to the water? Like where the
Yeah, the focus was more on really the idea that came out of the master plan itself was to make this more available to the public. It's a public asset as a public waterfront and a public park. And that, yeah, most people didn't know it was there. And, you know, it's beautiful when you're there, but a lot of people weren't taking advantage of it. So here, where if someone comes to the market and they're gonna make that connection down to the waterfront, or if someone's coming off the path, like I think I mentioned to you before, off the bike path, which I do frequently, just to go over to the water and then I get back on the path. So this connectivity between those spaces, I think, is really going to open it up to people to say, yeah, it's, you know, this is here. And then the historic tie is important too, because of course this is a very historic part of Milton and Boston.
Right.
And on the other side.
I think the biggest disconnection today, like I was just there this weekend at Madre. I don't go there very often, but we were there. It was a beautiful night and it was great because we were just down by the water and beautiful. However, the parcel that's looking out across is not very great. And then you've got if we go in at this park, there really is connection between that moment in 88 Wharf and then what's up on Adams. And there's a big disconnect. So I love the stair connection that comes down into this park and connect everything through it. I would love to see it continue to go down to the water, because like that's another big piece of this. And I imagine it will continue to grow and make more connections. But I was here like Cheryl and Kathleen and saw your early design, and I think it's come a long way. I really like it. The only other piece I would say is I would consider adding shade to like the big round piece. Is like, is there some shading elements to it? Because it's, you know, we get feedback all the time for the one over the, like, you know, East Milton deck, people are complaining all the time. So when you can provide a little bit of areas of shade, I think it would be helpful, whether it's trees or architecture.
Right. I mean, I think that's, you know, we've heard that twice tonight, which is great. And I think that we can definitely do that for sure. Because I think there's pockets of planting opportunities.
But then another thing I think is parks and stuff are successful when you program them. And just like the East Milton deck, there's a huge investment in that. And there's not a ton of programming there. So just from like parks perspective, I'd like to see the town like figure out some programming for here. This has obviously got one program for Milton Farmers Market, but that's only one time a week. And so I throw out to the community to figure out like what's the kind of programming that you want to see here. And this is a really great place. You've shown parks programming here. There could be people come down and exercise here. And so it's basically it's a good opportunity.
Remember, it's not parking. Right? It's not parking.
Yeah, and that's, so we'll work that out in terms of like capacity, and, you know,
I got a bike. I can
parking opportunities.
In the winter, it'll be great. And the reason I say that is, a lot of people think that Milton Landing is available for their parking, and we're constantly telling cars. So come on ahead, we'll tell you way.
And it may be one of the, like, if this space eventually becomes, you know, a spot for concerts or, you know, a theater show, there's gonna have to be staffing at that. There's gonna have to be potentially chairs brought in here. There's gonna have to potentially be a stage there. there's gonna be people to be able to direct traffic or say, there's no parking here or you're gonna get towed. And that would be incumbent upon whoever is gonna be the one who's having the event.
Just because parking issue is arguably one of the most accepted issues in the It's there and you can buy it. Might be stretching it. So, anyways, and just building on what you said, the really high level canopy that you pictured for the concert, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
I've seen parks, a friend of mine is working on a park in North Carolina that has that as permanent, maybe more semi-permanent. Would that be a summer, permanent?
The only thing that limits those kind of structures is if you get a storm
Yeah,
and someone has to run out when the wind is going to be over 50 miles per hour and take it down.
that's very ambitious.
It's
Yeah.
it's not a quick thing that you want to be taking down when a racer's approaching.
The canopies at Trillium, you guys have probably been there. It's the same exact structure.
Yeah.
The largest one there is, I believe it's like 30 feet.
Yeah.
And this
That's
circle,
long.
the inside diameter of the circle is 70 feet. So,
Inside diameter is what?
70 feet, the circle. And so, if that's sort of interest as we're developing the design, I'm sure like when we're developing the technical drawings, it's not just we're drawing this and that's it. Like we're studying it in terms of constructability and program. So, maybe there's an internal post that helps with this. I guess where I'm going with it is that we don't have the answer yet, but there are options for sure.
I've also seen a lot of them where they do them in threes, like there's 3 smaller pieces, right? And it may not be, I forget who mentioned it, but like if you're looking at the sunshade study and you study the perfect time of day when you want shade in this zone, you would be able to study how big of a piece of fabric you need to provide shade in just that spot. That piece of fabric in that rendering is probably overkill for the amount of shade it's going to create. So I think, again, like what Bill's saying, it would be about determining how big of a piece of fabric we really want to be taking up, or putting up and taking down.
Do you guys have any idea of cost?
For that.
So Matt and I, we went to that, was it in
Transform it.
Transform, and we went to
No, I don't mean I mean just the park today without transform it.
the cost of the
Yeah,
park.
just the park itself.
If we got to design it the way we wanted to design it.
I'm saying what you designed today. Like, did you have a thing for them?
So we will do a order of magnitude, but I mean, there's a park now is 750. It's with, I think we know about landscape. Plants have a huge impact on cost, whether or not you're planting, like if what we're showing that evergreen screen, is that a 10-foot evergreen screen or is it trees that are going to grow over time? So there's a lot of implications. Really the greatest price point for this is going to be the retaining walls and the paving. There's going to be a significant amount of, cut and fill. That's going to happen, but earthwork compared to cost isn't.
Are you with this design? Are you taking?
We would try to balance the site. We don't want to. Ideally, we're probably going to bring in material.
There are right now, besides the open beach, 4, 5, 6 trees
Norway maples along that.
provide shade also that are not.
So to backfill that wall, we would have to take them down. Yeah. So I don't feel bad about that. They're invasive, and I personally try to eradicate the Norway maples. And I know I don't know if Marita agrees with me. We get into arguments about this all the time, but that's sort of my perspective on it. And especially since we have a wall in disrepair, the solution of backfilling against it and not investing in a new wall, it's a lot of it's never really black and white. You have to sort of prioritize. And we think that this is sort of a better strategy.
We have a sprinkle system.
It should.
That just up the cost.
So that's a great question because, you know, if we are thinking about this park 40, 50 years, like we need to create planting environments that will be able to withstand severe heat. And to do that, some sort of irrigation system would be great. And the town could control it. So, you know, we don't want to use a lot of water if we don't have to. But right now, Mother Nature is all out of whack, and you don't know if we're going to get a lot of rain or not any rain. And so it's a challenge for us.
So also, speaking of 50 years, you know, the floodplain is very close here already. And the parking lot by the waterfront floods.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've looked at this elevation relative to sea level rise and in whether the selection of materials, plant materials and otherwise can withstand the flood, you know, saltwater flooding.
Yeah. So we would often in these types of conditions, because it's close to the street, all of the plants that we select will be salt tolerant, not because of sea level, but because of what's coming off of the street. And de-icing and all of that. So those are things that that's a part of that filter.
And then even just the stormwater, the ability of a park, like the parks that are done on Boston waterfront now, you know,
Right.
where they are really part of the stormwater design, right? And it's like depression, the way the plant materials are selected. So I just wonder if that's something as it develops beyond the concept that you should think about.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Bill, I just want to say thank you. You know, thanks for taking my call and, you know, meeting with the planning board. I think it has come a long way since when I saw the picture in the paper.
Definitely.
So thank you for the consideration, and I really do think you know, the planning board block with Cheryl's experience and Meredith's eye for historic preservation. I just really think it was in Jim's practicality, and John Driscoll was there from a maintenance perspective. So I really think it was a very productive meeting.
Definitely.
And as a concept, I think it's a great concept. And I know that it's just the beginning. And I know a lot of people have a hard time visualizing what the space could look like. I have a great eye for visualization, and I think this is kind of what I was sort of looking for long term. So I thank you and Scott for taking the lead and, you know, listening to our suggestions. And I think from Adams Street, where the park really starts, going all the way down to the waterfront, you are connecting the whole space. And I know in time, you know, things change, you know, from a landscape perspective, from a plant material perspective. But I think this overall design works. I am a little bit afraid about the whole planning. To me, you know, growing up in Milton my whole life, it's a great park. I was one of the first vendors at the farmer's market when it was over on the left-hand side in the parking lot. So I do appreciate the trees, because back then there was any tree coverage. So I am concerned about over programming, because we're running into that problem now, you know, with the library. The library is now over programmed, and now we're looking at possibly taking away green space to do a parking structure. So I am sympathetic to the neighbors at 88 Wharf. This is their backyard, and it is what they're looking at. And it is a public space, but right now it's not overly programmed. So I would be concerned with that. But I think as a whole, as a park, because we're trying to do a lot in a very small area.
Right.
So my focus is it's a park first and foremost.
Right.
And then from there, different things can happen in the park. So I think from a park perspective, I think it's, a really great design and, kudos to you guys for, soliciting advice and patience from listening to all of us. It's not easy, so thank you.
Great, thank you for the feedback. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of groups in the town that had interest of using it. But as you know, programming these outdoor spaces is never easy. And we love the idea. I mean, just to be told, we feel like the 88 Wharf residents, when they're looking out, they're going to be looking at this really beautiful, intentional green space, which will be quite amazing. Just so like sometimes when you have that ground plane that looks intentional, not just sort of like this leftover green space, and it has a different feeling. And sort of all of this geometry sort of came from, that planning, the site walk, really. And so now it sort of feels like it's a real place, which we love. But thanks for everybody's feedback. We appreciate it.
I just wanted to say, kind of what's going to happen from here and what the process is going to look like. We're going to do a similar presentation that's going to be taped at the select board on the 10th next week. And then from there, we're going to be putting an application into the CPC for some funding to get this started. And in that development of that process, CPC is probably going to take another month to look at all the different applications. But we are going to be responsible for budget development, and also this park likely isn't going to get paid for all in one chunk. So we're going to look at possibly phasing this process to see, well, what can we tackle at the beginning? What can we, the bathrooms clearly we can deal with downstream, but are there things that we can do up front? And then some things that we can wait a couple of years to address further. So that's kind of the plan of what's going to happen in the next couple of months. I did print off 35 or so copies of the slide presentation, as well as the notes that we got from folks in the community, those 5 points that I talked about before. I detailed those in the sheet, so feel free to take those. And also there's some other information with it, but there's also a sign-in sheet. What we're going to do from here is we started this process. It was Nick, it was Chris, the two of these guys, and me as a steering committee in this process to try to get as much feedback as possible. The next step is there has to be a construction steering committee. And that's probably not my strong suit. It's definitely not my strong suit. I'd still like to be involved, but I think at this process, we're looking for folks in the community who want to be on that constructability side of it. We're going to be making some of the final decisions on what this concept is and bringing this concept to life. So on that sign-in sheet, there's a space for your name, your email address. Also, if you want any of this material emailed to you, just check the box, write your email down. I'll get that information to you. You can share it with folks in your neighborhood. But also there's a box on there if you are interested in learning more about the construction side. So thank you all for coming. Great learning process.
Thank you.
Thank you.